Hey there, fellow novel enthusiasts. Welcome to the very first episode of our deep dive into the thrilling world of Monarch of Death. In this video, we're going to journey through the first 5 chapters, where things go from, "Oh, that's interesting," to, "Oh, no, he didn't." Real quick, grab your snacks, maybe a pillow to clutch, and let's meet the Monarch, who's definitely not here to make friends. Spoiler, he's got a few deadly tricks up his sleeve. Ready? Let's dive in.
Chapter 1 Something Strange 1. The first thing Karnak saw upon opening his eyes was a plain-looking blond man in his 20s. Who is that again? He looks familiar, he wondered. As Karnak pondered the matter, a familiar voice reached his ears. "Excuse me, but are you the young master?" Recognition dawned. "Barrows, is that you?" The young man was his trusted aide from back when he was young, back before he became a Death Knight. "This isn't how I pictured it," Barrows mumbled, blinking with a dazed expression. "I thought I'd be more like, bye-bye, present me. Time to wake up in a new life, and my mind would fade to black. You know, the whole shebang." Karnak didn't bother correcting him. "To be honest, I thought so, too. Who would have thought everything would change in the blink of an eye? It was all so sudden, so surreal. Get me a mirror, I need to see what I look like." "A mirror? Why do you think we'd have such a luxury at this point in our lives?" As the Monarch of Death who ruled the world, a mirror would have been a dime a dozen for Karnak. However, as the illegitimate son of a rural noble, that was an extravagance he could hardly dream of. Instead, Barrows studied Karnak's face and said, "Don't worry, young master. You look exactly like you did at 20. Scrawny, black hair, black eyes, even the same arrogant look. Do I really look that crummy? That's why I always told you to fix that frown. You'd be handsome if you weren't always looking like a sourpuss, complaining about everything in the world." Tisk, tisk. Karnak chuckled and said, "At least some things never change." Even after returning to the past, Barrows was still Barrows. Still as cheeky as ever. He kept his cheeky trusted aide by his side for over 100 years. It was too late to be bothered now. Well, I guess I was a bit of a grump back then. Karnak looked around the dark cave. A small table stood against one wall, an open book resting on top of it. The only light came from a flickering candle. Karnak picked up the book, which looked more like a scribbled-on notepad, and frowned. Here it is, the beginning of everything. He had stumbled upon the ancient book deep in his family's storage room, though ancient book was a generous term. It wasn't even a proper book, just a crude notebook filled with messy handwriting that had no title. Someone's personal notes, not a published work. But the knowledge he'd gleaned from this book allowed him to take his first steps on the path of necromancy. "Let's see if it still works," Karnak muttered, snapping his fingers. A tiny spark ignited, growing as it engulfed the old book in flames. Whoosh! The flames died down as quickly as they'd risen, leaving behind only ashes of the ancient book. "So that's the extent of my necrotic power at this point." Karnak nodded. "Just as I expected. It's only natural, considering I've only just begun dipping my toes in necromancy." Barrows, who had been watching, flinched. "Wait, was it okay to burn that? I have everything memorized. What does it matter?" The book itself didn't possess any special dark magic power or anything of the sort. It was just an ordinary book containing knowledge. It's not like it holds any advanced knowledge. It's just the basics of necromancy. He had become the world's most powerful necromancer by constantly traveling and acquiring ancient knowledge. It wasn't as if this single book had instantly transformed him into a supreme necromancer. But that's all the more reason to burn it. If I could learn necromancy from it, someone else could too. And if anyone found out he had this book, he'd be lucky to get away with a hanging. Burning at the stake was a real possibility. There's no need to leave behind unnecessary trouble now that I don't need it anymore. After brushing off the ashes, he turned his gaze towards the cave entrance. A faint light beckoned from beyond. "Let's head out." "Whoa!" Karnak cried out. Barrows yelped. "Oh, what is that?" An overwhelming light poured down from above. It was an unbearable brightness, as if it could set the whole world ablaze. Barrows stared blankly and mumbled, "Oh, right. This is that thing. What? Sunlight. Now that you mention it, this is what the sun was like. Right?" The two looked around with dazed expressions. Their vision had adjusted, allowing them to see the world clearly. It was obvious, really. They weren't undead anymore but living, breathing humans. Why would sunlight feel like some kind of infernal hellfire? In reality, it was just a few seconds of slight discomfort. Their exaggerated reaction was more about the emotional impact. But they weren't done being dramatic. "Whoa!" Karnak exclaimed. "The sun feels so warm, young master. The smell of grass. I can smell the grass. There's also the smell of earth." The ordinary sensations that every human took for granted were hitting them at full force. Karnak and Barrows shed tears of joy. Tears! They could cry again. "Look, Barrows. Tears! I'm crying. I think I'm even getting a runny nose. I'm drooling. Can I also pee?" "Of course you can. We're human again. Actually, I think that's enough grossness. Let's not get too carried away." What was important is that they had regained their senses, their emotions, their capacity for awe. All it cost them was absolute power. They were no longer the strongest necromancer and death knight in human history. Who needs that anyway? Exactly. It's not like being all-powerful made us happy. Karnak turned to his longtime companion and declared, "This time, let's try living like real people." Two men walked along a sun-dappled forest path, the warm rays filtering through the lush canopy. They were dressed in simple, even slightly shabby, traveling clothes. The blond man, his hair tousled, raised a hand to his forehead and looked up at the sky. "The weather's real nice." The handsome black-haired man replied absent-mindedly, "Yeah, lovely weather." The sun was shining brightly. It was a genuinely nice, warm day. "You know, it's kind of too hot, Barrows. The sweating is irritating me." "Exactly. This whole, feeling things, business is getting on my nerves," Karnak sighed. "I forgot how annoying it is to have a living body." It had been half a day since they'd packed their meager belongings and left the cave. The heat was getting to them, their stomachs were rumbling, and their throats were parched. The initial wonder had faded, and they were starting to miss their past powers. It seemed the human heart was fickle indeed. "No use complaining now. We'll just have to get used to it," Barrows said pragmatically, unfurling a map. "We should be nearing Darha village soon." He compared the map to their surroundings and scratched his head. "I can't remember a thing. It was so long ago. They were back over 100 years in the past. It would be stranger if he did remember everything. But they'll have an inn, right? Since it's a waypoint village. That's probably why I chose this place in the past." It was the time when Karnak first secretly left his family to master necromancy, the time when he'd spent months hidden away in a secluded cave, immersing himself in dark magic power. "Judging by my mana capacity, it's been about 2 months since I first gained necrotic powers." "So it's not the exact moment you first felt it? A 100-year time jump is bound to have some margin of error." Even while mastering necromancy, he still needed to eat, and getting such services in the middle of nowhere was a tall order. That was why he chose the mountains near Darha village. Darha village was a waypoint village located on the Yustel Kingdom's central trade route. As a bustling hub for peddlers, it boasted inns, restaurants, shops, and everything else they might need. Karnak had frequently sent Barrows to buy supplies. "Now that you mention it, I think I'm starting to remember." Barrows's eyes suddenly lit up. "Wait, does this mean we can finally gorge ourselves on juicy steaks and fine wine?" Ignoring his aide's hopeful gaze, Karnak said with feigned sadness, "You think Darha village has restaurants that fancy? Even if they did, they couldn't afford it anyway. Not to mention, we have no money." "Right, we were pretty poor back then." Barrows lifted the money pouch at his hip. "It's pretty heavy, though. Must be because it's all copper coins." Karnak, at this point in time, couldn't imagine possessing something as high class as a silver coin, let alone a gold coin. He'd only seen those shiny things from afar a handful of times. Karnak sighed. What good is being from a noble family if they're dirt poor? And he was the good-for-nothing, illegitimate son of said dirt poor family, no less. He still vividly remembered scraping together every last copper for that secret journey, even after all these years. That was how much of a shoestring budget he had to work with. "This is why I was so desperate to learn necromancy, wasn't it? It's finally really hitting me that I'm back." As he walked, Karnak reminisced. "Wait, does this mean I have to see my parents and brothers again?" "I'd rather not." "Bleg. Me neither," Barrows grimaced. His family had been ruthless to Karnak, seeing him as nothing more than an extra mouth to feed. After all, they were a family on the verge of ruin, and Karnak was the illegitimate child, a living reminder of past scandals. If they'd been better off, they might have tolerated him. However, his two older brothers were barely scraping by themselves. Naturally, they took every opportunity to mistreat Karnak. Of course, Karnak had resented them right back. Could he really face them again and remain indifferent? Remembering the past, Barrows looked worried. "Young master, you're not going to start a fight the moment you see them, are you?" "Come on, I'm not that childish anymore. I'll just suck it up and play nice. Maybe tickle their fancy a little. Isn't the reason you ended up in that situation because you couldn't play nice?" Remembering his past self, the one who had brought down his own family, murdered his two older brothers, and committed countless other atrocities, Karnak chuckled. "I can do it this time. I'm older now, not that impulsive 20-year-old anymore. You are literally that 20-year-old right now. Yeah, but I've aged 100 years mentally. That counts for something." Back then, he couldn't stand being looked down on and lashed out with youthful recklessness. Now, he was confident he could handle things with more tact. Thinking back, Karnak mused, they weren't that bad. At the time, he thought he was the only one suffering in the world. But now, having experienced so much, he understood. His brothers were just ordinary people who, burdened by their own hardships, had taken it out on Karnak. Well, compared to a normal family, they were still pretty awful. Now that I think about it, it's making me angry. See? I told you that your temper hasn't changed. Just kidding, just kidding. Waving his hand dismissively, Karnak continued along the mountain path. His distant family could wait. Right now, the most pressing issue was filling their empty stomachs. "So, what should we do about money? Should we just rob someone on the road?" "Young master, I thought you said we should live like decent people." "Right, I did. It's a force of habit. Robbery is a habit to you? Why are you talking as if this only applies to me? You've directly killed far more people than me. But I revived them after killing them. The one who revived them was me. You only did the killing." The two continued bickering in a way that seemed both light-hearted yet serious. Eventually, the forest ended and a wide plain opened up in front of them. On the horizon, Darha village was faintly visible. "Whatever the case is, let's eat first. Then we can figure things out," Karnak suggested. Barrows's face lit up at the idea. They had to reserve money for fare to get home, but they could at least spare some cash for a meal. "I second that plan wholeheartedly, young master." Chapter 2 Something Strange 2. A small inn stood at the entrance to Darha village. It offered both lodging and meals, and on the first floor, several peddlers were having lunch. Few, however, were focused solely on their food. Their attention was drawn to two strange fellows among the guests. Oh my goodness. This is so delicious. Gulp, is this what flavor is? Yes, this is what boiling does. The two grown men, having ordered only 2 loaves of barley bread and a bowl of vegetable stew, stared at their meal as if performing a sacred ritual, making a scene with every bite. Naturally, the other patrons saw them as significantly mentally challenged. What's wrong with those two? Why are they making such a fuss? They look like they haven't eaten in 3 days. If they were that hungry, they should be scarfing it down. Why are they putting on a show with every bite? Despite the murmurs, the young men's antics continued. A while later, when the innkeeper, a middle-aged woman, brought them 2 glasses of ale, they even started to cry. Gasp. "Young master, this is alcohol." Sob. "I feel like I could faint just from the smell." It wasn't some legendary vintage wine. It was ale brewed at the village brewery. In fact, it was the lower-grade stuff, the leftovers after the good batches had been delivered to the Lord. Their reaction after taking a sip was truly a sight to behold. I could risk my life for this drink." "Technically, you already did, young master." Watching the two tremble after just a sip of ale, the other patrons came to a conclusion. "They're pathetically insane, let's just ignore them." Unfazed by the reactions, Karnak and Barrows were simply happy. It was the first food they had tasted in decades. Every bite felt like a wave of supreme pleasure washing over them. They couldn't imagine anything that could make them happier. Or so they thought. "Here's your order," a waiter shouted. At the table next to them, a dish of stir-fried chicken with an incredible aroma had arrived. Gasp. "They have chicken here? This must be a high-class restaurant, young master." Even in a prosperous trading village like this one, precious meat like beef or pork was only seen during festivals. During normal times, it was impossible to buy even if you had the money. Chicken, on the other hand, was within the realm of possibility, since one could easily raise them in their backyard. Of course, that didn't mean it was cheap enough to eat all the time. The fact that they served chicken if you had the money meant that this village was quite well off and had a lot of traffic. That is, if you had the money. The two began to whisper to each other. Barrows, ale with that chicken would be amazing. But how much do you think it costs? One thing was for sure, it wasn't something you could buy with a few copper coins. Those patrons were probably travelers of high social standing. The clothes they wore looked quite expensive. Karnak's eyes darted around. Should we just slaughter them all and take it? Don't forget, we want to be decent people, young master. Barrows calmly pointed out that even if they gave up on living like decent people, that plan was impossible. Do we even have the strength to kill everyone here? We'd be the ones who end up dead. Alright, they were no longer the Monarch of Death who ruled the world or the strongest Death Knight Lord. With slumped shoulders, Barrows opened his money pouch. It was time to pay for their meal. Sigh, if only we had the money. Baron muttered when something surprising caught his eyes. Huh? Barrows's eyes widened. What is it? Young master, something strange. What do you mean? Barrows cautiously glanced around and then discreetly pulled his hand out of the pouch. Now it was Karnak's turn to have his eyes widen like full moons. What the? A silver coin was shining brightly between his attendant's fingers. Why is that in there? Barrows quickly stuffed the silver coin back into his pouch and lowered his voice. It's not just one. He showed the inside of the pouch to Karnak, making sure no one else could see. There are more silver coins than copper coins. That's impossible. Karnak, dumbfounded, also checked his pouch. It was true. There were still plenty of copper coins, but more than half were silver coins. Wait, you're just noticing this now? You didn't check your pouch on the way here? Why would I? I thought I knew what was in there. As a servant, it should be your responsibility to check it. I was the second most powerful being in Necropia until this morning, you know? It's been 100 years since I was a servant. Had the pouch itself been switched? No, that wasn't it. The family crest was clearly engraved on the mouth of the pouch. It was just that the contents were different from what they remembered. They exchanged whispers, staring at each other. How much money did we pack when we left on our journey? Young master, how am I supposed to remember something from over 100 years ago? I distinctly remember we were so poor that we had to pinch every copper. The memory of living in poverty wasn't something you could easily forget. There's no way we had this much money back then. We were very frugal. This isn't on the level of being frugal. No matter how frugal you were, copper coins didn't magically combine to become silver coins. How did this happen? Looking at the pouch full of silver coins, Karnak felt a sudden surge of fear. He couldn't simply enjoy having more money. Something was definitely wrong. What did I do wrong? Did we not go back in time? Or did the space-time magic not work properly in the first place? His thoughts were interrupted by Barrows's next question. Young master? What? Does this mean we can eat chicken now? The chicken in front of him versus an unknown fear. The scales tipped easily. Screw it, let's eat first and think later. Karnak shouted. Hey, take our order. Karnak took a bite of the rich, juicy chicken. Wow, he immediately washed it down with ale. Ah-ha-ha. They ate and drank some more. Wah-ha-ha-ha. They emptied their plates in a frenzy, reveling in ecstasy. As the meal finally came to an end, Barrows mumbled contentedly, like a bear about to hibernate. Wow, I think I'm in heaven. I know, right? Was meat always this delicious? I don't think even drugs could compare. Didn't we try drugs, though? I remember it feeling like nothing. That's because we were already dead when we attempted it. There was no record in the continent's long history of undead getting high and giggling. Anyway, this is amazing. Karnak leaned back in his chair and muttered to himself. It was amazing. Incredible. He was so happy he could die. This pleasure was worth giving up all the power, authority, and glory. But he couldn't just sit there forever. All right, let's get a grip and think. Straightening his posture, Karnak looked down at the money pouch. What in the world happened? Barrows's expression turned serious as well. Do you think our memories are wrong? I can see mistaking 9 copper coins for 10. But mistaking 10 silver coins for 10 copper coins? That's ridiculous. Then did your magic go wrong, young master? How could space-time regression magic possibly go wrong in a way that turns copper coins into silver coins? Maybe the space-time continuum got warped, took our copper coins, and replaced them with silver coins? Karnak looked at him as if he was the biggest idiot in the world. How would that even make sense? Barrows retorted, sounding even more idiotic. That's for you to figure out. What do you expect from an uneducated swordsman? He had a point. Karnak shut his mouth, unable to argue. Barrows continued in a soothing voice. Let's just head back to your family manor. We can figure things out once we get there. You're right. Karnak leaned back in his chair again. The thought of going back filled him with dread. It would take at least 3 days to travel from Darha village to Zestrad mansion. It's going to be an exhausting journey. Oh, it'll take forever to get there on foot. At Karnak's grumbling, Barrows suddenly tilted his head. Wait a second. What now? Come to think of it, we don't have to walk back, do we? This is a relay station village. Why don't we just rent some horses? Relay stations rented out fine horses to messengers and merchants in a hurry. You had to go to a horse market to buy one, so renting was more common in these parts. You could only use the horses between relay stations, and the fee was quite hefty, but... What's the problem? We have all this money. Exasperated, Karnak chided him. You're not even a little bit concerned about where this money came from? Barrows shook his head and countered, will our worries magically disappear if we don't spend this money? Well, no. Then let's worry while we spend it. At least our bodies will be comfortable. Karnak blinked in realization as Barrows continued. A comfortable body leads to a comfortable mind, and a comfortable mind solves problems more efficiently. He first thought Barrows was being ridiculous, but the more he listened, the more the logic seemed to make sense. You know, that's strangely persuasive. After their heavenly meal, Karnak and Barrows headed towards the relay station on the west side of Darha village. They found the Darha relay station to be a fairly large establishment, a 2-story wooden building with a large stable attached to it. As they approached, a middle-aged man greeted them with a bright smile. He was probably the manager. Welcome back, gentlemen. The two froze in their tracks and whispered to each other. Back? Us? Welcome back, implied that they had been here before. The man bowed and continued, the horses you entrusted to us have been well taken care of. Entrusted horses? Karnak whispered to Barrows. We did? Barrows whispered back. Bewildered, they nonetheless maintained a semblance of composure as the middle-aged man led them towards the stable. There were a dozen horses tied up, and among them, 2 brown steeds began to snort and paw the ground as they saw the 2 men. Nay, nee. The man smiled and calmed the horses down. Looks like they're happy to see their owners again. Karnak and Barrows exchanged uneasy glances. The horses definitely seemed happy. They were definitely acquainted. Karnak continued to whisper, but we've never met them before. They're so happy it's making me uncomfortable. Handing them the reins, the man continued in a friendly tone, as you requested. I've been feeding them a mix of high-quality hay and beans. They're both full of energy. The man's consistently friendly, almost servile attitude. It was clear he was expecting something. Barrows caught Karnak's eye. This is, that, right sir? Karnak caught on, it is. Should I? Try it. Let's see how he reacts. With permission granted, Barrows put on an air of arrogance and took out a silver coin. You've done well. This is a small token of appreciation from my young master. Instead of being surprised at the sight of the silver coin, the man accepted it as if he had been expecting it and bowed deeply. Thank you, as always. I'll bring out the saddles you left with us right away. As they watched the middle-aged man scurry off towards the main building, Karnak muttered, as always? It seems we've done this before. And with silver coins, no less. We did? The situation was so absurd they were at a loss for words. Wasn't that how a clueless, nouveau riche young noble acted? Young master, what in the world is going on? Even Barrows was starting to get genuinely worried. I don't think this is something to be blindly happy about. Oh, that's what I kept trying to tell you. Do you finally get it? Karnak fell deep into thought. Did they really go back in time? It seemed so. The world was largely the same as he remembered. However, there were also significant discrepancies. I need to get home as soon as possible. That's the #1 priority, Karnak thought. Meanwhile, Barrows was also contemplating something. What should I call these guys? Hey, what are your names? Nay, right, I'm an idiot for trying to talk to horses. Chapter 3 Something Strange. 3. House Zestrad, Karnak's family, held a humble position among the minor noble houses of the Yestal kingdom. A mere century old, it lacked the weight of long-held traditions, but neither was it newly established. It was, simply put, an average, unremarkable rural barony. A truly unremarkable family, Karnak mused, a flicker of longing in his voice. Their land was neither blessed with abundance nor cursed by barrenness, yielding just enough to sustain them. They celebrated bountiful harvests and endured lean years with stoicism. Extravagance was a distant dream, yet they retained dignity befitting their noble lineage. They were merely one of the dime a dozen ordinary rural noble families. Karnak's grandfather, Baron Grelide Zestrad, had always been discontent with this mediocrity. "How long must we languish in this backwater? Shouldn't a man strive for greatness?" he would often declare. Driven by this ambition, he'd staked their territory as collateral in a series of ill-fated business ventures. The result? Utter ruin. The businesses crumbled one by one, costing them their few fertile plots of land. He died a man consumed by his own frustrated aspirations, leaving behind a legacy of crippling debt. Baron Crawford Zestrad, Karnak's father, inherited this burden, a barren land and a crumbling mansion. He toiled to restore their family's lost glory. It was an arduous struggle, made near impossible by the crushing weight of their debt. Thankfully, his eldest son was a promising heir, while his second son was talented in martial arts, becoming a respectable knight. The family, against all odds, managed to stay afloat. Truthfully, promising, and talented, were just my father's delusions, Karnak scoffed. His brothers were painfully average. Anyone could achieve the same with their upbringing and education. Despite being a fallen lord, Crawford clung to certain, noble habits. He took a mistress, justifying it as a nobleman's prerogative. He even brought her into the family when she became pregnant, displaying a sliver of responsibility. The problem was, his responsibility ended there. Karnak's mother endured relentless torment from the Baroness, eventually succumbing to illness. Meanwhile, Karnak grew up ostracized as an illegitimate son, forced to swallow his pride. Oh, the memories still sting. Shaking his head, Karnak banished the painful recollections and pulled a silver coin from his pocket. Anyway, that should be the state of my family. So, he rolled the coin between his fingers. Where did this money come from? Thanks to their horses, the 3-day walk from Darha village to the Zestrad estate was shortened to 2. Not as much time saved as I'd hoped, Barrows grumbled, glaring at his brown horse. Didn't the stablemen say they were well fed? Why do they tire so quickly? Karnak scolded Barrows. These are pretty hardy horses for a living creature. How was I supposed to know that? I've never ridden one before, Barrows scoffed. For reference, Barrows had only ever ridden a zombie horse, a skeleton horse, and a ghost horse, beings like that. They never tire, don't need feed, and never poop. Talk about convenience, praised Barrows. The only minor drawback was the fact that the constant exposure to death energy would taint and slowly kill the rider. Barrows continued, and that didn't matter to me, I was already dead. Thanks to their relentless pace, their destination was drawing near. The estate is in sight, young master, Barrows announced, his eyes scanning the horizon. Funny how the mind works, isn't it? Gazing at the fields of green barley, Karnak smiled wryly. I don't have a single fond memory of this place, yet seeing it again, it's strangely nostalgic. All I feel is annoyance, Barrows scowled. I wasn't exactly welcomed here either. He was an orphan from the territory. Located in the harsh north, the Zestrad territory was frequently targeted by monsters. Orphans were commonplace, so they weren't particularly ostracized. However, Barrows's situation was unique. His parents had swindled their neighbors, vanishing in the middle of the night with their ill-gotten gains and abandoning their child. As if being born to lowly scumbags was his fault, everyone seemed to believe the apple didn't fall far from the tree. No one wanted to take him in, and the territory wasn't wealthy enough to afford an orphanage or any such facility. That was when Karnak had extended a hand of salvation. Contrary to his usual timid nature, young Karnak had insisted upon taking on Barrows as his attendant. Even a neglected, illegitimate child was still a noble. For appearance's sake, he needed an attendant. Since dealing with Barrows was proving to be a nuisance, Baron Crawford had agreed. I was the only one who looked after you, wasn't I? I was the only one who'd look after the young master as well. Why are you bragging about it now? As the two chattered, their horses continued their steady pace. They entered the fields, and the figures of farmers came into clear view. Everyone seems busy, Karnak observed. Probably weeding season. Best to pass through quickly, right? Probably. Among the residents of the territory, Karnak and Barrows were known as the good-for-nothing youngest master and his even more useless attendant. They didn't expect a warm welcome, so they planned to pass through quickly, but then... "Ah, young Master Karnak, you've returned, sir." The residents, upon spotting them, didn't just greet them from afar, they were overjoyed. Some even had tears in their eyes. "Thank you for your hard work, sir. Oh my, you must have been through so much." This was nothing like Karnak remembered. "What have I done to deserve this hard work charade?" he thought with a hollow laugh. But everyone was greeting him with such genuine warmth that he couldn't bring himself to question their joy. Exchanging awkward waves, the two urged their horses onward, eager to escape the surreal situation. Glancing back, Barrows frowned and said, "I feel like I'm in a nightmare." "Me too. Let's hurry on home," Barrows muttered, staring at the grand stone wall before them. "Young master? What in the world is this?" Frowning, Karnak replied, "Don't ask me. I don't know anything anymore." Before their eyes stood a magnificent mansion. High walls, built with quality bricks, stretched out on either side. Beyond them, a glimpse of an elegant garden could be seen. In the center stood a dazzling two-story mansion, its terrace and various sculptures gleaming under the sun. "This is Zestrad Mansion, right?" "Yeah," Karnak nodded slowly. It was undoubtedly the house from his memory. At least, the basic structure was. Karnak studied the place. The wall and the garden are the right size, the building, too. But why is the mansion so immaculate? That's what I'm saying. It's like it's been completely renovated. The Zestrad barony boasted a century-old antiquated mansion. However, antiquated was just a nice way of saying it was worn out and decrepit. Due to their financial situation, proper maintenance had been neglected for decades. And yet, now every corner of the mansion was impeccably maintained. It was elegant, dignified, and oozed an air of aristocracy, the very image of a noble's mansion. "Where are we? Where have we ended up?" Karnak understood Barrows's question all too well. He wasn't talking just about the mansion. It was a question about this reality itself. I don't know. Let's just go inside." "Oh, dear me. Are lowly scoundrels like us even allowed to set foot in such a grand place?" Barrows asked. Nervously, they approached the main gate. One of the guards, spotting them, rushed forward with a bright smile. "Ah, young Master Karnak." It was a man in his mid-40s, someone Karnak recognized. Trying to act nonchalant, Karnak nodded. "I'm back, Katail." Katail turned to the other guard, his voice laced with urgency. "Quickly, inform the butler. The young master has returned." "Yes, sir." Watching the exchange, Karnak could only sigh. People from his memory were greeting them normally. Things seemed to be in their proper place. Except, the atmosphere was entirely different. Not only was the mansion sparkling, but the servants' clothes were immaculate. Laundry was surprisingly costly. He couldn't recall a time when they had the funds to afford such fine attire. And the enthusiastic welcome on top of. The opulent drawing room was adorned with elegant paintings and decorations. Steam rose from the teacups placed on the table. Tea, Karnak thought with a dumbfounded expression. In his time, he'd never even dreamt of tasting such a luxury. Glancing sideways, he saw Barrows desperately trying to conceal his own bewilderment. "It's been over half a year since you ascended to the position of Baron, Lord Karnak," Taffel said in a soft voice. It seemed Karnak had inherited the barony at the age of 20, immediately after his coming-of-age ceremony. "Have you achieved what you set out to do?" "Achieved?" Karnak blurted out, caught off guard. The steward, momentarily surprised, repeated his question. "That's what your journey was for, wasn't it?" Karnak cleared his throat, trying to play it cool. "Ah, well, more or less." Fortunately, the steward didn't seem to notice anything amiss. "That's good to hear. The late Baron will be pleased." "Wait, my father is dead?" "And Lady Isabella. She would have been so proud if she were still with us," the old man continued. Isabella was Baron Crawford's wife, Karnak's stepmother. "My goodness. That woman is dead, too?" "When even Master Tessel passed away, I was worried sick, but now I can finally breathe easy." "Even my oldest brother is dead?" Karnak couldn't help but be curious. "What about Big Brother Feralt? What happened to that rotten asshole?" He at least figured his second brother wasn't safe and sound. If he were, the title of Baron wouldn't have fallen to Karnak. But what in the world had transpired? "This is killing me, but I can't just ask outright." And what was this about a thing I set out to do? There's only one reason why I would travel during this age. To master necromancy, the power he had stumbled upon, in secrecy. There couldn't be any other reason. It was clear that the current him was practicing necromancy. There's no way I would have revealed the truth about it. If his secret was out, rather than a warm welcome, a warm pyre should have been waiting for him. What does Taffel think my purpose was? Another question plagued him. Originally, Karnak had pursued necromancy to gain power and exact revenge on his family. But looking at the current situation, it seems like his revenge was already complete. He was the Baron, he was respected, and everyone seemed to hold him in high regard. Why would I have bothered to learn necromancy if my life was already this comfortable? He had no idea, not a single clue. If I still had my powers, I could just use mind control and extract the information, but I'm in no position to do that now. Karnak gave some side glances to Barrows, telling him to do something. It was weird for two people to be able to communicate just with their eyes, but this duo had been at it for over 100 years. Barrows immediately got the hint and interjected, "Mr. Taffel." "Yes, Barrows? Lord Karnak is exhausted from his long journey. Perhaps we can continue this conversation tomorrow?" "Oh my, you're right. How thoughtless of me." The butler clicked his tongue and rose from his seat. "My apologies, my lord. Please, get some rest." "I shall do so." Relieved to escape the interrogation, Karnak rose from his seat. "Let's get out of here, quickly," he urged Barrows. "Couldn't agree more, young master." Chapter 4 Something Strange. 4. Night had fallen, but Karnak, lying awake in bed, couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Oh! He stared at the bedroom ceiling, adorned with luxurious wallpaper, and sighed. How much did that cost? And why is it on the ceiling of my room? It wasn't just the wallpaper that felt out of place. The furniture, the bed, even the candles were all of the highest quality. He was no stranger to luxury. As the Monarch of Death, he had been surrounded by things far more extravagant. But this was a far cry from the humble bedroom he remembered. This wasn't part of the plan. He no longer yearned for the power of the Monarch of Death, but Karnak hadn't intended to live a subpar life either. He had devised a way to enhance his power while erasing the side effects of necromancy, at least in theory. And he even had a backup plan, just in case. No longer the hot-headed youth he once was, he planned to simply appease his parents and siblings, maintaining a more or less harmonious relationship with them. No matter how much they despised him, their attitude would surely change if he showered them with money. And how was he going to earn that money? He had a plan for that, too. He had meticulously gathered all sorts of historical records, dates and locations of future wars, droughts, famines, even where treasures would be discovered. He had planned how to invest and build his wealth using that future information. His goal was a comfortable and secure life, neither too flashy nor insignificant, just enough to live comfortably. A life in a house just like this, with a status just like this. Looking around the mansion and considering the household that now belonged to him, Karnak felt a sense of emptiness. But I'm already living that life? He had merely returned to the past, having done nothing so far, and yet his life goals had already been achieved. He wasn't foolish enough to be complacent and think, "Wow, I've got it made. Time to coast. I need to figure out what's going on." Karnak muttered, tossing and turning in bed. "Why isn't Barrows here yet? Don't tell me he's asleep?" It was only after a long while that the awaited knock finally came. "Young master, young master." Karnak's face brightened, and he called out to his attendant in a low voice. "Come in." The door opened quietly, and Barrows slipped inside, looking around cautiously. Karnak sat up in bed and asked, "Is everyone asleep?" "Yes. Finally, I can move around." "You're going to mind probe the butler geezer, right?" "Of course. But with my current abilities, it's difficult to use it right directly." He needed a catalyst. He also needed a drug that could weaken the target's mental fortitude. He had to make sure the target was sound asleep and then cast a mind probe on him to achieve his goal. So, there are a few things we need to prepare first. Delas petals, jace herb, perel extract, rapateu grass. They're all weeds that grow in the garden, so they should be easy to find. Before he could finish, Barrows reached into his pocket. "Here you go." Inside the pocket were the necessary weeds. "Huh? You already prepared them? I've been with you for over 100 years, young master. You think I wouldn't have this much intuition?" Barrows shrugged. "I'm late because I was gathering these. The garden is so well maintained that it was hard to find them. I see. They only used to be everywhere because the garden was neglected. But now that they were all weeded out, it would have been harder to find them. If I had to go back and search for them now, we would have wasted the entire night. Good job. Karnak gestured as he left his room. Let's go. What if the other servants spot us? We'll just say I couldn't sleep and went for a walk. Judging by the atmosphere, no one will question me for doing what I want. Well, you are the Lord now, aren't you? That's right, Karnak chuckled in disbelief. Me? A lord? The illegitimate, good-for-nothing me? Delas petals, jace herb, perel extract, and rapateu grass were crushed and mixed in a bowl. Then, using necromancy, Karnak set the mixture ablaze. Fwoosh! The flames flared up momentarily before dying down. All that remained was a plume of black smoke. The smoke moved like a living creature, swirling through the air. But it was, in fact, Karnak controlling it with his magic power. The black smoke seeped into the nostrils of the old butler lying on the bed. His body trembled for a moment, and then his eyes rolled back, revealing only the whites of his eyes. Good, he's completely subdued. Satisfied, Karnak gave the command, "Rise, my servant." The command in his voice resonated with power, and the old man immediately sat up in bed. Yes, master. The old butler was now in a state where he would answer any question truthfully. Now, what should I ask first? Karnak hesitated for a moment. There's so much I want to ask, it's difficult to even organize my thoughts. He decided to start with the most pressing question. How did my father die? The answer came immediately. 3 years ago, he was slain by the blade of the treacherous Sir Randolph. Karnak and Barrows exchanged glances. Randolph? Barrows, you know who that is. Wasn't he a knight from Deventer? You know, the neighboring territory. Hearing only the conclusion without the context was confusing. And what about Baroness Isabella? Grief-stricken by the loss of the Baron and the first young master, she fell ill. And in the end, she never recovered. Ah, so that's the order they died in. Karnak continued his questioning. Then what happened to my big brother, Tessel? The first young master. He bombarded the butler with question after question. Each time, the dazed Taffel answered faithfully. Thanks to this, Karnak was able to grasp the situation to some extent. So, until I turned 16, nothing much changed. The Zestrad territory being on the verge of ruin, the family's contempt for Karnak as an illegitimate child, his reputation as a good-for-nothing, it was all the same as in his past life. The change occurred 4 years ago, in the year 683 of the Yustal Kingdom calendar. Feralt, his second oldest brother who usually practiced martial arts while wandering in the mountains, stumbled upon a massive copper vein in a cave to the north. A copper vein? Karnak frowned. I don't recall ever hearing about a copper mine in our territory. Barrows shrugged. It's possible we just didn't know about it before. It was discovered by chance, after all. Even so, it sounds too convenient, don't you think? Discovering a mine within their territory was a common fantasy among all rural nobles. Of course, it rarely happened in reality. If mineral veins were that common, they wouldn't be such a big deal in the first place. So, when a noble family announced the discovery of a mine, people usually thought, those bastards must have earned their money through shady means and are using the mine as an excuse. But the copper vein was real. Overwhelmed by this incredible stroke of luck, House Zestrad immediately began developing the mine. It was said to be a very high-quality copper vein, and they were able to see some results within a year. However, they didn't develop it themselves. Mining was a business that required advanced excavation and civil engineering techniques. It wasn't as if copper ingots would magically pop out just by digging a hole. They needed the technology to separate and refine the copper from the ore. There was no way a barony that only knew farming could have developed a copper mine on their own in just 1 year. So they entrusted the mining operation to the Tikas Trading Company, the largest trading company in the Yustal Kingdom. They possessed the necessary technology and manpower, naturally taking a cut of the profits. The problem arose after that. The neighboring Deventer Viscountcy, which had always been wary of House Zestrad, picked a fight. Their argument could be summarized as follows. The copper vein was originally discovered by the Deventer Viscountcy. Furthermore, the location of the copper mine is a neutral zone bordering both families' territories. However, the benevolent Viscount Deventer proposed that both families jointly develop and own the mine, and Baron Zestrad accepted. But after assessing the scale of the vein, the Baron shamelessly broke the agreement and changed his tune. They are distorting the truth, as the copper vein was originally discovered by the Deventer Viscountcy. Furthermore, the location of the copper mine is a neutral zone bordering both families' territories. However, the benevolent Viscount Deventer proposed that both families jointly develop and own the mine, and Baron Zestrad accepted. But after assessing the scale of the vein, the Baron shamelessly broke the agreement and changed his tune. They are distorting the truth as if they had discovered it from the beginning. How can we forgive such treachery? We will reclaim our rights, even if it means bloodshed. Barrows scoffed. Wow, how shameless. Well, they were always shameless, weren't they? But the thing is, Karnak shook his head. It's not a completely baseless claim. The copper mine was located in the northern part of the territory, on a tributary of the Yedden mountain range. Based on its location, it clearly was within Zestrad territory. However, when it came to territories, especially mountainous terrain, the boundaries weren't always clearly defined. While the ownership of cultivated farmland was well established, the same couldn't be said for forests and mountains. It was common for both sides to simply mark them vaguely on their maps and move on. Since it was essentially useless land, they rarely bothered with the expense of surveying it. It's definitely near our territory, but it's also true that it had gone untouched by us. If House Deventer had indeed discovered the copper mine first, while claiming ownership might be difficult, they would be in a position to demand joint management rights. If they really were the first to discover the mine, that is. Do you think it's true, young master? I can't say it's impossible. Karnak scratched his head, recalling his past memories. But I don't think it's likely. Why not? Because Deventer is much stronger than us. Unlike the declining Zestrad barony, the Deventer Viscountcy had been steadily accumulating power for generations. They far surpassed the Baron House in both military and financial strength. If they had intended to develop it jointly from the beginning, no one in their right mind would have taken such a risk. As a result, the relationship between the two families deteriorated drastically. As was to be expected, words turned into fists, and fists turned into swords. Inevitably, the two families engaged in a territorial war. There were several bloody battles, most of which ended in defeat for House Zestrad. As expected, House Deventer, which had steadily built up its strength over generations, was not to be trifled with. A year later, tragedy struck when Baron Crawford was killed by Sir Randolph, Deventer's strongest knight. While trying to cover the retreat of his soldiers, even young Master Tessel, the heir, was struck by an arrow shot by Randolph, leading to his death. The House of Zestrad lost both its head and heir in one fell swoop. Baroness Isabella, heartbroken by the loss of her beloved husband and son, fell ill. Feralt, the second son, became the acting head of the family. Although Feralt desperately rallied the remaining troops and fought back against the Viscountcy, he couldn't turn the tide. The following year, he too became a victim of Deventer. In another clash, he lost both his legs to Randolph. Thanks to his regular training, he managed to barely cling to life. However, having become immobile, he could no longer serve as a knight. Driven to despair, he drowned his sorrows in alcohol and drugs, his health deteriorating rapidly. Eventually, Feralt succumbed to his despair and died. It was around that time that Baroness Isabella, who had been lingering on the brink of death, also breathed her last. Damn, our entire family was wiped out by this Randolph guy? Was such a powerful individual in our neighboring territory before? Barrows chipped in. I don't think that Randolph was that strong. It's more likely that our family was just too weak. So, who is this Randolph anyway? I barely remember his name. Well, it's not like there's any reason to remember some knight from this backwater place. Karnak and Barrows, who had fought against the 4 great martial kings, the 3 wise archmages, and the legendary dragon emperor, had no reason to remember some insignificant knight from a rural territory. Brushing it aside, Karnak continued to interrogate the old butler. So, what happened next? The only surviving member of the Zestrad barony was Karnak, the illegitimate son. The position of successor fell to him. It was decided that he would officially assume the position of head of the family when he reached the age of 20. Upon hearing this, House Deventer declared a temporary ceasefire, stating that they would wait until Karnak became the lord. It was a truly noble and dignified response. Of course, I bet it was all for show. In reality, they were just waiting for someone they could negotiate with. House Deventer's goal was not to completely annihilate House Zestrad and seize their entire territory. They simply wanted to take over the copper mine and receive war reparations. And for that, they needed someone who could officially sign the agreement. At the time, there was much opposition to the idea of Karnak, who had been nothing but a good-for-nothing, becoming the Lord. However, after 2 years had passed and he had officially assumed the position, it was said that everyone acknowledged and respected him. They respect me? Why? At Karnak's question, the old butler's eyes suddenly welled up. Who wouldn't respect the Lord who risked his life to protect his territory? What the? He's shedding tears even under a mind probe? How sincere is he? Just as Karnak was about to move on to the next question, something struck him. Wait, I risked my life? Karnak's face hardened. What's that supposed to mean? Why would I risk my life? Chapter 5 An Excellent Lord? Who? Me? 1. Karnak sprawled on his office sofa the next morning, the memory of breakfast still a pleasant haze. Ah, that was delicious. Fluffy omelets with sweet jam on fragrant white bread, savory sausages, and perfectly roasted carrots. Being rich definitely had its perks. Eating such luxurious food first thing in the day. I thought I'd be stuck with rough meals for a while after regressing. Lost in the afterglow of his meal, he didn't hear the knock at first. It's Barrows, young master. Come in, Karnak instructed. The sturdy, blond young man entered. Karnak, still lounging on the sofa, asked, Are you sure it's okay to keep calling me, young master? I'm the Lord now, you know. Won't it seem strange? It should be fine. Apparently, it's a mistake I make often. The old butler had given up when Barrows couldn't abandon his habit even after much scolding. It might even seem more natural this way. All right, if you say so. Did you eat? Yes, the food was excellent. Are they even serving good meals to servants? Yes, they are. We must be truly rich now. Barrows glanced at the documents piled on the office desk. But, young master, are you sure you should be relaxing like this? Didn't you say being the head of the family came with a lot of work? Ah, those? Karnak shrugged, glancing at the territory management reports. I already finished them. Already? Did you think I'd actually struggle with something like that now? The workload, which would typically consume an entire morning for a newly appointed 20-year-old lord, was nothing to the former Monarch of Death. I finished them while enjoying my dessert. What? Dessert? Lucky. I didn't get any. Karnak smiled wryly at his attendant, who seemed more interested in trivial matters. Are desserts really that important right now? Of course they are. I gave up fame and fortune for them. Well, you're not wrong about that. I'll sneak you some later. We have more pressing matters to attend to. Ah, right. Barrows composed himself, taking a seat across from Karnak. His expression turned serious. What are we going to do about the trial by combat? The Deventer Viscountcy had made their move as soon as Karnak officially became the head of the family. The Zestrad barony had been tense, sensing the impending threat. Honestly, they had no way to stand against Deventer with their current strength. Only 5 of their 9 knights remained, 2 of whom were recovering from injuries. The condition of their 100 or so territory soldiers wasn't much better. The only way to survive would be to hand over the copper mine and pay a hefty sum in war reparations. However, that would mean losing all the wealth they had gained and becoming even poorer than before. Their subjects would starve. In such a desperate situation, it was their new lord, Karnak, who stepped up to save them. He declared in front of everyone, in the name of Ilium, goddess of the moon and justice, I challenge House Deventer to a trial by combat. According to the order of the moon's doctrines, Ilium would grant victory to the righteous in a duel held in her name. This teaching was the foundation of the trial by combat. It was a system where both parties fought a fair fight under the watchful eyes of an Ilium priest to settle disputes. At first glance, it might seem like a barbaric method where the strong took everything, but that wasn't always the case. The duel couldn't proceed without the consent of both parties. Additionally, penalties were imposed if there was a blatant difference in strength, and it was also possible to appoint a champion to fight on one's behalf. Of course, that's how it's supposed to be. But in reality, it's just a way for the strong to take what they want. Barrows shook his head. Was he out of his mind? What on earth possessed him to do such a thing? This was something Karnak should never have proposed. The difference in their strength was evident. He had no champion to field, and Karnak, at the tender age of 20, was no great warrior. He should have vehemently opposed it even if Deventer had been the one to propose it. Why would he dig his own grave like this? Barrows asked. The judgment of the sacred trial by combat was decided only by the death of one party. Once it began, surrender was not an option. It was also too late to back out now and admit defeat. The Order of Ilium would have Karnak's head if he did. Karnak slumped his shoulders. Well, at least now I understand why the butler and the other subjects are treating me so differently. In fact, from an objective perspective of House Zestrad, the terms weren't entirely unfavorable. If they continued with the territorial war, they would lose the copper mine and have to pay a large sum in war reparations. But if they took it to a trial by combat, the chances of winning were slim to none. However, even if they lost, they would only have to hand over the copper mine, the cause of the conflict. Once the judgment was passed, all grudges would be settled in the name of Ilium, eliminating the need to pay a hefty sum in war reparations. At the very least, they could prevent their subjects from starving. Young master, I don't understand why Viscount de Venter agreed to this duel either. He could have just continued the war and seized a huge amount in war reparations. He has to care about his reputation. It wouldn't look good to be seen as someone who oppresses the weak. It would also lead to rumors among the other nobles. Besides, House de Venter wasn't exactly struggling financially. If he can cleanly take over the copper mine through a trial by combat, he's willing to forego the war reparations. It's still not a bad deal from his perspective. And so, the trial by combat between Sir Randolph, the strongest knight of de Venter, and Karnak, the new Baron of Zestrad, was decided. Who wouldn't admire the young lord who risked his life for them? Damn it! No wonder everyone's been looking at me with those sparkling eyes. As Karnak gnashed his teeth, Barrows posed a question. So why did you step up yourself? You could have appointed a champion. Hey, I stepped up? No, it was that damn 20-year-old brat Karnak who did. Karnak, initially flustered, took a deep breath to calm himself down. He then asked casually, so, Barrows, you wouldn't mind being my champion, would you? Barrows was no longer a death knight. He was a frail human, an owner of a body that hadn't even undergone proper training yet. You can still at least handle a knight from this backwater place, right? Ah, so that's why you called for me? Barrows scratched his head and shook it. I don't think that's possible right now. Huh? Why not? With your experience, you should be able to handle that much. He had fought alongside Karnak for nearly a century. Even if he had returned to a frail human body, his accumulated experience was immense. You were the second in command of Necropia. You even defeated 3 of the 4 great martial kings. That was all thanks to the power you bestowed upon me, young master. But you were the one who wielded that power, weren't you? And see, that's a common misconception among those who haven't properly mastered martial arts. Barrows gave a wry smile. Just because you have experience doesn't mean you can overpower a third-rate knight after switching bodies. No matter how skilled a swordsman was, they couldn't use their skills without arms. No matter how proficient one was in kicking techniques, they couldn't utilize them if they were paralyzed from the legs down. This was an extension of that concept. At the very least, one needed a body capable of executing the techniques they possessed. That was the bare minimum requirement. Young master, do you remember when I stopped you back in Darha village? I wasn't exaggerating. If a fight had broken out then, I would have been completely helpless on my own. According to Barrows, a child's body that had at least received basic martial arts training was more useful than his current large but untrained physique. Of course, I could win against a child even now, but utilizing my experience is a different story. Karnak frowned. Oh, isn't it a bit pathetic for someone with over a century of combat experience to be so weak? It's because I've fought for over a century that I'm accurately assessing the situation. Of course, if I start training now, my progress will be faster than others. I won't be making any rookie mistakes. After a moment of calculation, Barrows continued, about half a year. If I train seriously for that long, I should be able to handle your average knights. A mere attendant who had never held a sword properly surpassing a regular knight in just 6 months? It was a preposterous claim that would get him labeled as delusional. Experience was indeed an asset that couldn't be ignored. The problem was, the trial by combat is in a month. We don't have time. Well, then there's nothing we can do. Damn it, Barrows asked, puzzled. This isn't like you, young master. I understand that I was just a measly attendant, but you could have appointed another knight. Yet you chose to risk your own life. I don't remember you being that selfless. Karnak paid no heed to his attendant's disrespectful tone, which lacked even a shred of reverence. He'd endured it for over a century, after all. Instead, he responded seriously, after hearing everything. I think I understand why things turned out this way. There were no knights in the current Zestrad barony who could serve as his champion. My big brother Feralt was the strongest knight in the family, but that bastard is dead. At this point, the chances of the remaining knights defeating Sir Randolph were practically zero. He continued to explain, there's no point in putting forward a champion who's guaranteed to lose. Since the trial by combat was held in the name of the goddess, the defeat of a champion was considered the defeat of the participant they represented. In other words, if his champion lost, Karnak would have to take his own life. Since either way led to the same outcome, it seems the Karnak of this time found a different solution himself. About 2 months ago, Karnak had suddenly declared, I have a plan. Trust me and wait a little while. And with that, he had embarked on a journey without further explanation, returning just yesterday. Now, isn't it obvious what kind of plan I came up with? Barrows smirked. It was indeed obvious. His master had done something similar in the past. Necromancy, Barrows answered. What on earth possessed the Karnak of this timeline to do something so reckless? It wasn't something he could find out by rummaging through the butler's memories. Even the Karnak of this time had kept his necromancy a closely guarded secret. But I can make some educated guesses. Karnak's discovery of the necromancy book stemmed from a long-standing habit. Since childhood, he had sought refuge in the family's old warehouse whenever faced with hardship. The act of rummaging through the warehouse in a dark, deserted place brought him a sense of peace. Come to think of it, I was a pretty gloomy child, wasn't I? You were gloomy and reclusive even as an adult, so what's new? I wasn't that bad, was I? Do socially well-adjusted adults end up as skeletons who kill people with a flick of their fingers? Shut up. The Karnak of this timeline likely followed a similar path. As he became the Lord and the situation grew increasingly dire, he probably holed himself up in the warehouse seeking solace, only to stumble upon the necromancy book. Learning necromancy near the territory would have exposed him immediately, so he must have journeyed to the distant Darha village. The reason for choosing Darha village was also clear. Finding a secluded place far from the territory but still being able to easily procure necessary goods was no easy feat. It's the same 20-year-old me, just in different circumstances, so it's only natural that we'd arrive at similar conclusions. The only difference was that in his past life, he had run away with Barrows in secret, but this time, he had announced his departure. It all makes sense now, Barrows nodded in understanding. I was wondering why you, with nothing to lose in your current state, would bother learning necromancy. Then he suddenly asked, but can you really defeat a knight with just 3 months of necromancy under your belt? His opponent was Sir Randolph, the strongest knight of Deventer territory. He might pale in comparison to the renowned knights of the royal capital, but he was still at a level unattainable by ordinary people. Even if necromancy is a forbidden art that grants rapid power, 3 months seems too short. Karnak looked at Barrows with an incredulous expression on his face. How can you of all people say such a thing? What do you mean? You've seen firsthand what I was capable of in my prime. That was over a century ago. I barely remember when you had flesh on your bones. Karnak furrowed his brow, but he couldn't deny the truth in Barrows's words. I genuinely think I can win, Karnak changed the subject. Necromancy is the ultimate taboo. Even the slightest trace of its use will have every religious order on the continent hunting you down. Why do you think necromancers still emerge despite such risks? Necromancy was a path to power that was simply too easy. It was quick, effortless, and didn't require any talent. Anyone, not just me, could gain a fighting chance if they set their mind to learning it. Barrows tilted his head. Then what's the problem? You said you have a way to win. Yes, there is a way to win. But, Karnak let out a heavy sigh. He was a necromancer, not a mage. It meant that necromancy was all he knew. There's no way for me to hide it.
And that's a wrap for chapters 1 of 5 of Monarch of Death. Thanks for sticking around. Hope you had as much fun as I did. If you're just as hooked as I am, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss a single chapter. We're posting every day, so you won't have to wait long to see what chaos unfolds next. Until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.